All right. I'm really excited today. Welcome, everyone, to Israel Unfiltered. We have with us today Robert Singer. Robert Singer is probably one of the more fascinating names that you may have not heard of, running many NGOs that are Jewish and Israel related and doing tremendous good for the people of Israel and the state of Israel in particular. And we're going to dive into all these big NGOs that we kind of hear of and about, but it's kind of not so relatable. So that's why I brought on today Robert Singer. Robert Singer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the first thing is I want to start with is an NGO. Why are NGOs necessary?
I think you should divide it into parts. Why NGOs is necessary generally, and why NGOs is important in Israel and for Israel. And let's deal with the second point. When I came to Israel and was looking how to have any influence on what's happening in the country these days, like 50 years ago, the route was very clear. You had to go to work for the government or to stay in the army, and I had chosen the second. The situation today is pretty different. So the government is not as powerful as it used to be. We do have 31 ministries, as you know, starting 2 weeks ago. But if you ask an average person on the street who is the minister of one of these ministries, excluding maybe the important ones, the five important ones, most of the Israelis wouldn't have a clue who is the minister. So the influence of, and it goes in many ways. So today, the phenomenon we have in Israel is more or less going American direction. That more and more NGOs are taking a more central role in what is happening in the society, and basically the private sector also became pretty influential. And in many ways, the private sector is running the country. I mean, except the fields like the security and the international policy, but otherwise, in many ways, NGOs are important players.
Awesome, great. So let's dive right in. World Jewish Congress, right? You led up the World Jewish Congress. Probably, I would say, the biggest name when it comes to Jewish NGOs, at least with name recognition, I would say. Would you agree? Would you say it's probably the leading NGO when it comes for Jewish causes?
I would say it's an umbrella organization of over 100 Jewish communities around the world. All these communities are represented on the board of World Jewish Congress. It's run by a very prominent Jewish philanthropist, the president of the World Jewish Congress, Ronald Lauder, who is well known for his philanthropic activities in many ways. And the chairman of the board of directors is David de Rothschild, and the treasurer is Shela Safra. So three very recognizable names in the Jewish communities. But every Jewish community has a presence there. So from the point of view of the representative voice of the Jewish community worldwide, World Jewish Congress is probably the most representative body.
Got it. So when you were leading the World Jewish Congress, how did you know to put your resources, where to put your resources, not just money, I mean time, when you have so many competing Jewish interests? How do you manage such a thing? I mean, just managing two Jewish organizations sounds difficult, but to be an umbrella organization, it sounds like a headache. No.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it's a great question. As you know, it's you have on every island 3 synagogues. So how do you do it with 100 Jewish communities? And it's not only 100 Jewish communities, because within the communities, it's not like everybody accepts the recognition of the representative body of this community. And within every community, you have at least 5 other organizations that are claiming the fame of being the representative body of in this specific country. But I think broadly speaking, it requires a very strong leadership, which World Jewish Congress at my time used to have, because you had Ronald Lauder as a president, and both from his philanthropic point of view, but he's a recognizable person in the community. And one of the keys is for the president and the CEO working closely together, which was the case for almost 7 years that I used to work with Ronald. From the point of view of priorities, some of the priorities really come from the realities. At my time in the World Jewish Congress, suddenly an issue of security of the Jewish communities became a big issue. An issue of anti-Semitism and the neo-Nazi groups or movements became an issue. An issue of assimilation was always an issue. An issue of social needs or education was an issue, and all these issues are coming to the table, and so it's a kind of a collective wisdom of all the presidents of Jewish communities worldwide. Obviously, everybody is pushing in their own direction and for their own needs. But at the end of the day, I think it's a very effective body. At least my years then, I think it was pretty effective.
How are you able to effectively lead this organization? I mean, you were saying, I don't know if you were you alluding when you said the island with 3 synagogues, were you alluding to the joke of the 2 Jews stuck on the island?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to tell the joke in case people didn't understand your reference? Because it's pretty funny.
The joke is that a boat is arriving to an inhabited island, and they thought there's nobody there, and suddenly they see a Jewish guy who came there like 10 years later, and he's telling them, I built here 3 synagogues. One I'm going to, the other one I never step in, and the third one is for somebody who will come here later, and I don't want him in my synagogue in the first place. So
right.
this joke has different variations, but it's
I know different variations.
All go in the same direction.
It's right. The synagogue I refuse to step in. We all need one of those.
Yeah, but the reality of things that Jewish communities are facing tremendous problem around the world, and everybody's coming with the real issues. So if you come, after the elections in Sweden or after the elections in Italy, each one of these communities wants an attention, and really people are sitting in the World Jewish Congress. I was on the professional level. I was the CEO of the World Jewish Congress, but there was a lay leadership that is creating a policy, and professionals who are implementing this. And you always have to choose, because the resources obviously are not enough for everybody, and also the attention is not. You can't do as much as needed. It's a strong organization, but still it requires a very serious investment of time and funds.
So how does an NGO like switch priorities? So let's say before like the war in Ukraine, I'm saying your priority might have been, let's say, poverty in Israel, assimilation in North America, right? Growing anti-Semitism in Western Europe, and maybe positive things like building deeper ties with the Arab world from the Abraham Accords. And then you have something like the Ukraine war comes in, where suddenly we're like, how do we help the Jews of Russia and Ukraine? How do you reprioritize when you're invested so much in Jewish communities that need your help, and suddenly there's a more urgent matter because there's a war? Do you immediately take resources, time, and money from other things and bring them in? Do you try to go and raise extra money? Are you successful there? How are you able to, how is an umbrella organization so large be able to pivot so quickly when it's needed suddenly, immediately?
Yeah, that's like everything in life. You have the important issues and you have the urgent issues. So you set up your priorities, which, for example, World Jewish Congress or the Center of Jewish Impact that I'm chairing now is setting up the priorities. But then really things are happening. So suddenly you have a war in Ukraine. Suddenly 60% of Ukrainian Jewry is not in Ukraine anymore. And suddenly the Jewish communities in Germany, for example, are almost doubling in size because Ukrainian Jews are arriving there. Suddenly the immigration in Israel goes from 20,000 only a year ago to 70,000 this year. And so all your priorities, basically you have to flow with where the Jews go. And I'm not speaking about many other challenges that communities are facing all the time. So as the CEO of the World Jewish Congress, if you want to do your job properly, you wake up in the morning and basically you have a kind of evaluation room or kind of editorial room every morning, and you come to the office and you say, okay, that's what I was planning yesterday. Is it relevant? Is it relevant today? So this is one of the things. The other thing is really to have boots on the ground. And boots on the ground are 2 issues. You need to have proper professional and lay leadership teams in different communities worldwide that you can trust them, but you also have to be there. So when I was on the World Jewish Congress, I spent like 200 to 120 days a year traveling the communities. And the idea is not to come only to the capital cities, but really to go to the small communities as well, which are usually much more vulnerable than the big ones.
Right. Got it. So, okay. And then, so you started a couple years ago, the Center for Jewish Impact, right? Love the name, by the way. Terrific. Right to the point. What is the mission? What do you feel that you're able to do at CJI that you founded it that you weren't able to do? I mean, when you were leading the World Jewish Congress.
So when I finished my role in the World Jewish Congress, I was not planning to start the Center for Jewish Impact. And what happened, I saw that you studied at Bar Ilan University. So what happened to us is I came to Israel. I'm doing completely different things. And then I started getting phone calls from different embassies here and different friends and different ministries of foreign affairs in worldwide. So we're talking about the beginning of the pandemic of COVID pandemic worldwide. Israel was leading in many ways, and everybody around the world wanted to know what's going on here, and they had difficulty to get information. So they really approached us, and I said, okay, I can't say no to something like this, not to the communities, not to ambassadors, and nobody else. So we'll do kind of one big digital event and we'll try to bring best people here on the ground that are dealing with this issue. So we thought that we'll have like 50, 60 people from a couple of communities. It was done on 3 days, notice. We asked the University of Bar Ilan to partner with us because they had some of the most prominent scientists in this area. And guess what? Suddenly, like 350 people showed up from almost every Ministry of Health worldwide. Almost every Jewish community was involved, and many of the ambassadors. So, and once again, at this stage, we still thought that it's a one-time thing. And then, so they started coming with different ideas. Elections in Israel. We got here into something which was unusual for Israel. Every year, different elections. Then they needed to know some other stuff. So then suddenly I found in my office the special representative of the European Union to the Middle East that wanted really to meet with the Israeli public, and on top of having the usual briefings from the foreign ministry and kind of a party line, wanted to meet kind of real people in this country. And so one thing brought to the other, and suddenly we found ourselves involved in all these issues. So at some stage, about a year ago, I said to myself, listen, it can't go like this. We have to put it on professional food. That's why we created the Center of Jewish Impact, which is trying to be a kind of representative body of the Israeli civil society. We don't have the Israeli flag behind us. It's not an official organization. It's a kind of call it NGO or whatever. It's a small group. It's not so small, but it's a group of people that is trying to represent what people in Israel really think on different levels. And then it started rolling from there. So the embassy started approaching us. So now we have a diplomatic salon once a month. So the first
Awesome.
one was with the European Union. And so every month it will be different.
So it keeps leading this thing out. It keeps leading to other opportunities, other ways to engage. But it just keeps growing, basically, right? It never ends.
Yeah, but I'll tell you where it comes from. It's not like we sit here and think, let's do something like this, or let's create a strategic plan or something like this. It's really comes from the needs from the field. It comes from the needs from the embassies, from the foreign ministries, from different international organizations. And we are trying to be very pragmatic, less strategic on this, very pragmatic, and give people the information, the knowledge that they need.
So as an NGO, you were saying, right, we don't have the Israeli flag behind us. We're not officially representing the Israeli government. Would you say are you able to have a better impact if you were represented by the Israeli government in a sense, if you do have their backing and their sponsorship, or do you feel that all the headaches that come along with that might not be worth it?
No, we are just in a different ball game. It's we are working obviously with different ministries here in Israel. We have very close relations with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the Prime Minister's office, with the Ministry of Education, many other with different mayors here in the country. We don't represent them. So, for example, if the special envoy for the Middle East wanted to know what young people in Israel think, we brought a group of 35, I think, CEOs and owners, young up to the age of 40 of high-tech companies here in Israel because they want to understand what's happening here. And another time we brought the employers, people who employ big companies here that employ over 5,000 people here in Israel. So it's just a different footing. It's not the flag behind us won't help us in this. And I think that the government.
So that's what I was thinking, right? It wouldn't be helpful. Almost maybe they might even get.
No, I think the government has to do what the government has to do. But I think that the civil society in Israel today is not. It's a very kind of it's grown-up society. It becomes more and more involved, more and more effective, and the people really want to do stuff.
So, what are your greatest challenges then? I mean, because there's so many demands. There's only so much time. You only have so much budget. You only have so much staff. You can only put so much focus. And I'm sure everyone's coming to you, both from your experience leading up the World Jewish Congress and now for the Center for Jewish Impact, that a lot of people are coming to you for connections, network, opening doors, maybe money, access. How do you prioritize who you connect with whom?
Yeah, so that's I looked at your YouTube and I saw that you kind of have like 20,000 followers, 25,000 followers, 30,000 followers
on LinkedIn. On YouTube, 3,000 something.
3,000. So on some,
which is a lot
others.
for YouTube.
Yeah, on some others. But so what we saw this year, really what we saw this year, and maybe it's one of the results of pandemic, is and especially somebody like myself that used to work for big organizations all my life, being this IDF or Prime Minister's office or the foreign ministry or different capacities or World Jewish Congress. Suddenly I saw that in many cases you don't need, all these historic organizations are tremendously important and they play a very important role. But in today's environment, I'm not sure that this is the most effective way to get to people and to reach different audiences, because then there you really find yourself with the tone of expectations from communities, from different people. Being a smaller organization like like the Navy SEALs or something like this, you can target specific targets. So I'll give you maybe an example. We are planning now with one of the big embassies here. We are planning a special event on in the importance of climate change, dealing with climate change in the Middle East, how it's going to change the area. With other embassies, we are doing things on innovation and education. Somebody else, we are doing on the importance of women being involved in political life of different countries. Big organizations don't do stuff like this because big organizations, they have to, it's a big to change something there. It's very different. Here you can be much more flexible. So I think it's combination of two.
So when you bring together, let's say, these organizations, or you're working together with, let's say, an embassy, or even a foreign NGO that wants to work together with you guys to learn what's going on or to make an impact, like how much, like after the event, after the get together, how much impact is actually there? Or is it mostly just an exchange of ideas, then everyone continues on their way and they bring the ideas and what they learned from other people along with them? Or is there like a follow-up, like an implementation plan or so on? Or how exactly does it play out? And I'll tell you why I ask. I have this feeling about the perception. I shouldn't say feeling. I have this perception about NGOs that it's like, yeah, they're doing stuff, a bunch of bigwig people, a bunch of bigwig people. Even you're like, oh, I wonder what young Israelis think. You're like, we bring in like, founders of startups, which is not the average Israeli by any means. And I'm speaking for all NGOs throughout the world, that I feel like, it's a lot of people, well-connected people speaking to other well-connected people. I mean, and everyone else feels like this isn't relatable to me. This isn't relatable to my life. I don't understand these people. I can never connect with them. They'll never listen to me. They never ask me my opinion. What's the purpose of, like, what the hell's going on there? How is it actually helping, let's say, everyday person? Why, or should an everyday individual, like, let's say, my neighbors, why should they care? And if they want to get involved, how do they get involved if it seems to be mostly well-connected people connecting with other well-connected people?
Yeah. No, first of all, without the follow-up, whatever you do has no meaning. It's completely meaningless if you don't follow up on this. The other thing, the advantage of somebody like me being involved in, let's say, in the Center for Jewish Impact is that there is no agenda there. I've been in all these places. I was the CEO of the World Jewish Congress. I was the CEO of World War. I'm still the chairman of the board of trustees of World War. I run huge, big operations in the former Soviet Union.
You control the weather and the media also, right?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, that's more or less the perception. So I really don't have to prove at this stage of my life. I don't have to prove to anybody about anything. And what I'm trying to do as a volunteer is really to see where is the niche and where is the gap that we can fill in. So it's not like I don't have to raise money. Most of the money for the Center for Jewish Impact that we need is already provided by the number of donors. By the way, like all the other organizations I'm involved, people are still looking for a safe pair of hands. They find themselves as a safe pair of hands. And it's not like Center for Jewish Impact and other organizations don't need money. They do. But they are not running after, they're not doing very proactive fundraising campaigns. They're not doing projects that raise money. These organizations are doing what really is needed. So this is the follow-up is one thing. The second thing, don't have organization and sake for organization. Have the organizations that really has something substantial to provide. And listen, young people like yourself, they're very busy in their lives. They have too many things to do. They have too many choices and too many organizations running after them, and they're very smart. So, and the people we have involved with the Central Jewish Impacts is more or less, people your age and people who are doing different things in the middle of their career, in the middle of building their personal lives. They won't waste half an hour on something that they don't think it's worthwhile. So we have a group of people who are involved in different fields of industry here. Some working for Facebook, some working for different high-tech companies, some doctors, some engineers, some coming from political life. It's different guys. And a minute after they are bored, they will leave. It's not, they have no, there's no organizational commitment here. You don't have to grow up here for 20 years to become a macher in the Jewish organization. It's not the case.
Got it. So how do you get your funding?
The initial funding the initial funding we got from a number of donors whom we know from previous years, and Center of Jewish Impact is completely new. It starts rolling now. And by the way, it doesn't need significant funding. The other organizations organizations dealing with the special education here in Israel and stuff of this kind, mainly there are family offices standing behind them, and they provide the funding for most of this. That's why, which allows us to be independent and to choose our own priorities and to do the stuff that really we believe needs to be done.
So you mentioned like special education. Education is one of my favorite topics. Do you ever lobby the government then to do certain things for special education or more funding or more accessibility or some? I'm curious, do you ever go to the government and make requests? Might go to like the education minister?
Yeah, no, first of all, we have very close relations with different ministers that used to be in the Ministry of Education for last few years. But our concept is a little bit different. We don't want we lobby them in some way, but basically what we want to do, we want to lead the process and to let them join us. So because otherwise, if funding comes completely from them, or if we depend on their funding, so you really can't lead it in the way you want to. So I'm involved here as the chairman with two organizations, one called Alumot Or, and the second one called Sasa Seton. And I'll give you maybe an example to explain how it works. Sasa Seton is an organization that takes care of 140,000 kids who are hospitalized in 41 hospitals in Israel. So Israel is a very special country from this point of view. It has a law for hospitalized kids, and the basic idea is that every child that comes to the hospital and stays there for more than 3 days, he is required to participate in almost a formal education. So there is a school in each one of the hospitals. There are about 1,500 teachers who are involved in this process. But the school is till 12 or 1 o'clock. Then teachers go back home, and we take it from there. So we're working very closely with the Ministry of Education. We have national service girls and boys who are involved in this process, are based in each one of these hospitals, and we have hundreds, if not thousands, of different programs in each one of these schools. So we do receive some government funding, but basically it's led by the initiative is led by us. We do it with the Ministry of Education for the last 13 years. And on our funding side, there is mainly one family of Swiss Jews who went through Seton, who went through their own tragedy in their lives, and their kids passed away. Sarah and Samuel, that's why it's called the Sasa Seton Foundation. And most of the funding comes from this family. Some additional funding is coming from small donors as well. But once again, our focus is not to focus specifically on fundraising. Our focus is to focus really on what is needed for the schools. The other organization called Alumot Or is a Ray of Light, and it deals with the excellence in special education. So the money comes from a family of 2 Holocaust survivors, Auschwitz survivors, who passed away and left some fund. And they wanted to help kids with special needs in Israel. And we were looking where we can be most effective. And we found that, as the saying goes, that the weakest link in the chain in the educational system is autistic kids, because it affects immediately 3 generations. The child itself, the parents, and parents immediately start preparing also the brothers and the siblings to take care of these kids after they passed away. And the whole family is involved in all this process. So initially we built 4 schools for autistic kids on different from the north to the south, and now we enlarged it, and it's not only autistic kids, but we have 8 schools, or 8 schools that are actually our schools, called Benjamin Rothman schools, plus additional 8 schools that are affiliated with us. And basically, we produce not only provide for the schools themselves, but we produce now also the kind of knowledge center of knowledge that will be provided also on national and I guess shortly also on international level.
Amazing. Is it hard? You mentioned that you have volunteers from national service. For those that don't know, those that choose or can't go, let's say, to the military when they're 18, they can do national service, basically a year or 2 of volunteering. And these are one of the organizations that you can volunteer with, as an example. Do you find, is it hard to recruit volunteers?
It's hard to recruit volunteers, but not because there are no volunteers. It's hard to recruit volunteers to hospitals because you need to have a special character. You're coming every day to hospital. Kids are changing all the time. You don't have, you can't create ongoing relations because some children stay there for 3 days, some for 3 weeks, some for three months. You also never know who your client is because it can be a Haredi kid, it can be a kid from the 5th grade, it can be an Arab kid, it can be a Palestinian kid, it can be a new immigrant, a tourist. So everybody speaks different languages. It's a very, very complicated project. But it's not difficult to find volunteers. The volunteers go people who are involved with us to come every day to the hospital and to see the suffering of a child or the pressure the child is in before the operation or before some medical procedure. And at this difficult time, you're coming, let's speak about mathematics, physics or geometry or stuff like this. His mind is completely in a different place. It's very challenging.
Yeah, I'm sure. It sure sounds like it. To bring it back to what you were doing at the World Jewish Congress, or now even, where do you get the most fulfillment, right? And like the day-to-day work of an NGO? Is it mostly connecting people, organizing events, maybe looking for fundraising? Like what does your day-to-day operations look like because obviously from the outside, that's not what's actually being done daily. And where do you feel like you get the most fulfillment?
No, I think the fulfillment is, everything you mentioned is a long term. Nothing is short term. It's not like if somebody wants to volunteer and he's expecting that tomorrow he will speak with the ambassador in the European country, and a week later this country will vote for Israel at the United Nations or the European Union. Don't even go this way. It takes a long time to build relations. It takes a long time to provide the information. It takes a long time to build the wall. So first of all, you really, somebody who is involved in something like this has to come with the mindset that you are doing something, the results of which you maybe will see in a year or two. I'll give you an example. When I was the CEO of the World Jewish Congress with a group of people, we initiated a campaign called We Remember. So initially, people didn't think it will work out. What do you mean everybody will be standing with the sign We Remember? So the first year we had I think we had something like 5 million people that participated in the campaign. And the second year it reached 2 billion people. Today, 8 years later, or maybe 10 years later, you can see it in every country. I'm coming to visit different countries, and they tell me, the city hall was light this year with the We Remember, and in almost every place in the world. So it takes time to build something like this. Or another thing that we did together with Ronald Lauder at the World Jewish Congress, we had the first time the digital petition against the neo-Nazi march. In this case, it was in Lukov March, famous Lukov March in Sofia in Bulgaria. And 180,000. So once again, we thought, who knows who is going to sign the petitions? At the end of the day, in 1 month, we had 180,000 signatures. So to bring the 3 books with the signature to the Prime Minister of Bulgaria to put it on his table, and among them like 5,000 from Bulgaria itself, this gives you kind of satisfaction. But even then, you should understand that you are running here long term.
Right. What effect did that actually have on the march or on any policy?
No, the march initially was diverted from the center of the city to side streets. It almost didn't have any coverage in the national and the European level. The police was involved in this, so some of the people were kind of warned before the march not to participate. And from year to year, it became a less and less important event. It used to be the event of Nazis in Europe. You don't hear about this anymore, which doesn't mean that it won't happen a year or two from now once again. But at least you saw the practical results of this. Basically, in all these positions, what I personally was trying to do is really to be very pragmatic. There are enough researchers and enough books are written on different things, but we are trying to be very pragmatic in everything we are doing. And when you ask me what is my satisfaction to see young people who are working with me, because I'm now doing all this as a volunteer and not in professional capacity, but I see to build up the young generation of professionals, for me, is the best. For example, the CEO of the Combat Anti-Semitism movement is somebody that that he came to me from the army and slowly built up his career, and today he's running one of the very important organizations.
Do you want to talk about that? Combat anti-Semitism?
Combat anti-Semitism is, for me, I was born in Ukraine. And for me, anti-Semitism is something which I know from the age of, since I remember myself as a kid. So it wasn't kind of a big phenomenon. When my family was planning to leave to Israel, it was one of the first families in the city called Chernobyl, which is in western Ukraine on the border with Romania. So when my family decided to leave, and once again, it was pretty new. It was a few years after the Six-Day War, and the Jews kind of suddenly saw some opportunity. And after being in refuseniks for almost 3 years, we suddenly got the permit to leave. So I was put in front of almost all the school there, or definitely of my class, and listening to how that I'm a traitor of the motherland, and how come you're living? You were provided here for years. We saved you from during the Second World War, and suddenly you're going to be shortly drafted to the Israeli army, which was a very kind of anti-Semitic approach to the whole thing. So for me, to look to what's happening today in Europe, and both as the CEO of the World Jewish Congress, but also today, and even just as an Israeli tourist going to different places. And for me, the very fact that like 80 years after the Second World War, Jews in Europe, but not today, also in the United States, are thinking twice if to go for Shabbat to pray at the synagogue, or to go with the kippah, with the yarmulke, or to wear the Magen David Adom. The very idea that you have even to consider it or to think about this, Europe especially, because that's where Holocaust happened, for me is something which is completely unacceptable, and something which really needs to be given as decent fight as possible. So one of the tools to deal with it.
Let's talk about that fight for a minute. Sorry to interrupt you. I find that no one's actually putting up a fight against European anti-Semitism, particularly even Western Europe. That I would say, right, the Abraham Accords happened like 2 years ago. 2 years ago, they didn't even recognize my existence or your existence in, let's say, Dubai. We didn't even exist. However, I would say it is safer for a Jew to wear a yarmulke, a kippah in Dubai than it is in London or Paris. How is it possible that 2 years ago they didn't recognize us and it's safe to wear a kippah, or safer? I can't walk around in London with a yarmulke on and feel safe, or Paris, or much of other parts of Western Europe, including Germany, other parts of the UK, Portugal, etc., Spain. How did we get here? One, is it inevitable? Is it just ingrained in I don't know, European blood culture? I don't know. Is there a way forward, or should we just, or is it not even? Are we at a point where our focus to combat anti-Semitism would be better spent on more optimistic grounds, maybe North America, Africa, the Arab world, the Muslim world, Asia, etc.? What are your thoughts?
No, I think the challenge is that it's all of the above. You have to do all of this on at the same time, which is problematic because you cannot focus, and you still don't know where exactly the problem is, even after all these years. And we as the Jews, we as Israelis, were being suddenly surprised, like 5-6 years ago, with this suddenly out of suddenly this happens. Suddenly our synagogues are attacked. Suddenly the communities are not safe. Suddenly it's an issue. Since I was dealing with the communities, I can tell you that when I used to come to the community and look at the budget of the community, maybe up till a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 or 5% of the budget of the community was devoted to security. All the budget was for social, for education, for maintaining the school, for the Jewish community center, for the swimming pool, for the youth movements and stuff like this. Because really, people thought that 75 years after the war, and after what happened in Europe, something like this is unimaginable. People also thought that there are governments that should take care. If there is some problem, the governments should take care of this. And one day they woke up and saw what happened in different places, and all this changed in 1 minute. Now, the good news is that the senior political leadership of Europe understands it. And
I don't believe it. I don't believe that.
On what level? No, there are 2 levels here. One level is really, do they understand this, and B, do they do whatever they have to do? And these are 2 levels. On the level of understanding, I think once again, it's not everybody, but I met many heads of states, many ministers, prime ministers, presidents, and I sincerely think that most of them understand the problem, and most of them understand also that they have to deal with it. The problem.
Wait, hold on. What is the problem? Okay, anti-Semitism, but let's get tachlis, right? You were talking about earlier about neo-Nazis, white supremacists in Bulgaria, in Europe, right? And that's the form of anti-Semitism. From my experience in Western nations, so I'm not going to talk about Eastern Europe, but we can discuss that too. But the examples I gave, that it's safer now in the Arab world and in parts of the Arab world than it is in Western Europe. I mean, the anti-Semitism is overwhelmingly coming from Islamists, and is right. So why do they continue to import a population that is, according to Pew Research, is overwhelmingly majority pursuing anti-Semitism? I mean, would you say that the governments of Western European nations are aware, like what is the obvious, that the anti-Semitism in their country is coming from, one, Muslims and their sympathizers, number one, and number two, what do they do about it? They continue to allow immigration, and they continue to allow these things to continue. They're not doing anything. I haven't heard one thing spoken up against anti-Semitism in Western Europe, which is largely, from bringing in Islam.
No, I think the anti-Semitism is not coming only from the Muslim world. It is, but it's not only. It also comes from the extreme right. It comes from the extreme
left and the extreme right too. I understand that.
And it has
but those that attack synagogues, the majority of them, those that are trying to attack Jewish, I would say the plurality of them is an imported phenomenon. It's not domestically grown. Let's say, whether it's the neo-Nazis in Eastern Europe or the Nazis in Germany, during World War II. I mean, this isn't homegrown. This is imported and continues to be imported, right? And we're talking a plurality, if not a majority, of anti-Semitic attacks in Western Europe. So how do they justify continuing to import a population that, if you poll them, even as they land, which people have done, as they come into Western Europe, what are their opinions on Jews? It's really terrific. It's horrifying. I don't think that they know what the problem is. And if they do, I think they don't care. They'll pay the lip service to the Jewish NGO, and they'll continue to import anti-Semites because it might suit them politically or economically. Are my opinions too strong?
Your opinions are not too strong, but they're not full.
Please.
Because there are anti-Semitism has many faces. Really.
Yeah, unfortunately. It would be easier if we could just,
exactly. If we could focus it and if we could sit
and
there
we could put all our resources there and we'd all come together, but unfortunately it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and we don't want to replace dozens of scholars who wrote books about this and run ongoing service and and all the organizations coming with different statements every morning and every evening. So all this is going on, and it's but you are really going to the core of this, and the core of this at the end of the day,
because no one else is.
Yeah, at the end of the day, to deal with this properly, first of all, in the long run, there is no other way but education. There is no other way, because people really, it's ignorance. It's people don't know. People don't. I'm thinking about broadly. People don't know, don't care. They weren't given the tools how to deal with this. There was no proper legislation. The law enforcement officers have no clue how to manage the situation. So in the long term, it's the only way to deal with this. It's education. In the short term,
they're not addressing that. So
no, this will take decades. It will take decades, but we didn't do it before, or we didn't do it enough. So not enough.
Who's we?
No, I'm saying we as Jewish organizations, we as the state of Israel, we didn't push many governments. We didn't push them enough to include the educational Holocaust in the curriculum.
I read this morning that United Arab Emirates are going to be including Holocaust education now for their mandatory education and as part of their education, which is fantastic.
And it's fantastic, and the same you have in Morocco. That's fantastic, but we don't have it in many countries in Europe, for example, or we don't have it.
Does that blow your mind that the Holocaust happened in Europe, just as you said, 2.5 generations ago, and they don't have that education, but a country that didn't even recognize my existence is now pushing Holocaust studies on their entire young population? I feel like no one's calling them out, right? I always say, it's fascinating how we allow world leaders to try to criticize Israel publicly, but we don't ever criticize them back. Been like, hey, anti-Semitism has increased, 30% in the United States year over year. No one says anything to the American leadership or publicly. What have you done to combat anti-Semitism? It's only grown under your watch. I feel like we take all of the arrows, we put up a shield or two. We don't fling any back of those trying to, those that are responsible for the anti-Semitism in their own nations that are literally doing nothing. They'll just say, oh, it's terrible. Oh, okay. And they won't do anything. And I feel like no one's pushing back. There's no pressure campaign. There's no, hey, this politician, hey, leader of this country, anti-Semitism has increased this much. What have you done? You know, it's Sadiq Khan, mayor of London. Anti-Semitism has skyrocketed under your leadership. What have you done about it? Prove it. Like they're right. I feel like we allow criticism, but we don't send any back the other way. I feel like there's a problem there.
Yeah. No, first of all, we do call them to action. For example, Ronald Lauder, that's what he's doing. You know, and he and the group of leaders. Now, there are good news and bad news in what you said. The good news that people in the last few years might be too late. No, not maybe, too late. But people did wake up. And so you have today major figures in the Jewish world involved. People like Lauder, Kraft, Kish, Singer, many others are involved in this effort, which was not the case before. You know, each one of them did philanthropy and different things, but not on this. Many organizations came to the table. The Combat Anti-Semitism movement is a very new organization. It was established only 3 years ago. I assume they are the most effective today Jewish organization on social media. Very, very proactive. It didn't exist. There's one big donor behind them, which was not involved in this before that. So on one hand, really the Jewish leadership worked to deal with these issues, because it's became, you know, at the moment you have all these surveys saying that 25% of the employers in the United States will never hire a person because he or she is Jewish. So this is really a wake-up call. And it's not only in the United States; it's also in other places. So this on the Jewish side. On the European leadership side, I think that they started understanding that it's not a Jewish problem. Anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. It's a problem really for everybody. It starts with us. It never ends with us. And so the strategic plan that the European Union adopted a year ago, with a budget attached to it, and now started rolling into national levels, is something which will bring results at the end of the day, but it will take time, and maybe we don't have the time, because you know, the question really if Jews will stay in Europe or not. And this, when you ask me why they're worried, the European leaders, that's what worries them. The French leadership is
they're worried that the Jews will emigrate.
The Jews will leave their countries, not
what do they care?
No, they care. On this, they care very, very much.
Why?
Because the 600 Jews in France is a very important part of the Jewish community, of the French society, of the French economy, of the French social life, political life, of everything.
Yeah, but they don't. But I understand that, but they wouldn't feel it if Jews continue to leave. 1% of the population, 2% of the Jewish population leaves every year or two. It will be slow, and what do they care? And these politicians, it doesn't happen on their watch. We're talking about generational change, unless there's like obviously a war, and then I would assume many Jews do everything they could to get out. But I mean, I don't know. I understand that they care. I think they care intellectually. I think they care a little bit in their heart. But I say if you were to put their top 30 priorities, we're not up there, right? So we're never going to get the attention. They care, and they'll tell us what they want to hear, and they might believe it. Like, we care. It's an integral part of, let's say you were saying France, right? Of our history and of our future and a part of our economy and this and that, etc. Yes. But at the same time, they have a million other things, not to mention crime, their economy, their illegal immigration. There are all kinds of other things that they have to deal with. Assimilation, right? They have all kinds of problems, France, right? They have riots all the time. The media doesn't even cover it anymore. Sexism is on the rise, etc. So I feel like it's never going to be prioritized. They might feed us lip service when we speak to them one-on-one, and they may mean what they say, but to us, it sounds like music to our ears, and they're prioritizing it, and they might mean it, but they're definitely not prioritizing it.
Yeah, no, I disagree. It depends.
Okay.
It's different from country to country. Now, maybe we'll give you two
Of
examples.
course, and it's different from political leader to political leader. One country might be terrible now, the next leader might be great, and vice versa. I get that, but I'm speaking in generalization.
But let me give you two examples, and you'll see why I disagree. Last month, the Combatant Anti-Semitism movement, the Center of Jewish Impact, had the mayor's forum in Athens. So I came to the mayor of Athens 6 months before the forum, and I told him, listen, the Athens and Greece is the place where democracy was born. You had the first neo-Nazi party here in Greece, Golden Dawn. You implemented the legislation. And although you have a very small Jewish community of like 5,000 Jews who live today in Greece, we think that the right place to have mayor's forum is in Athens. So I came to convince you. He told me literally in 5 seconds, you don't have to convince me because that's what I want to do. And really, you're very, very welcome. And the fact that we had it like with some 70 mayors and deputy mayors from around the world came in on short notice, including the mayor of New York and some others, and it sent a very strong message. So it shows you two things.
One, strong message to who?
So one of the main tools to deal with the anti-Semitism is on the municipality level, on the level of cities, because in many of the places in Europe, the police is reporting to the mayor. It's not reporting to the kind of Ministry of Police. It's reporting on a local level. So once the mayor of New York flew, especially for this meeting, or Richmond, or some other cities, Beverly Hills, or Kishinev from Moldova, they came and flew in to this meeting and showed message to all the other mayors in their own forums. So,
but are there pledges to make any changes, or is it like exchange ideas? I feel like, you know what I mean? I did my good duty and then continue on their day-to-day responsibilities. And then it becomes an afterthought. Then it becomes another statistic.
I can't tell you that when the mayor of Beverly Hills comes back to Beverly Hills, this is the thing that now she's doing like 99% of her time.
I didn't say 99. I asked, like, is there something that wasn't being done? And now, okay, all the mayors that came, here's a new plan. Let's all do X, Y, or Z. We're all going to put a budget towards this and this. We're all going to put, you know what I mean? Like, who's going to pledge to put, let's say, to provide extra security for synagogues as a pledge to put that in your budget for you to have now indefinitely? What are you doing, for education? Can you review all of your textbooks that you're providing to ensure that there isn't anti-Semitism? If someone's reporting a teacher that's anti-Semitic, we're going to set up these kind of steps to ensure, you know what I mean, that they're being investigated and immediately put on, let's say, even paid suspension. Are there these kind of things that walk out so we know that there's actual steps, or is it kind of, we come together, we feel good, but then obviously we go back home and we have our million other responsibilities and things that are thrown on our desk from all the people that report to us as mayors. And then, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, not intended, right? 100% good intent, but then it becomes deprioritized.
Yeah. You just put an acting plan and acting points, which we did with them in Athens as well. Maybe a little bit different point, but in the same direction. I'm just curious, right? It comes back to what you said before. Everything is about the follow-up. They came to a conference. It was nice 2 days. They saw Athens. They saw the Acropolis. We discussed for 2 days anti-Semitism. The very fact that we were sitting in the room for 2 days discussing anti-Semitism by itself and the interface dialogue by itself is very, very important event. Something is there now. But the question is really now the follow-up. And that's what the organizations like Combat Anti-Semitism Movement are planning to do. So it's going to be another follow-up. I'll give an example. If we had about a year ago Balkans Forum. It reached out to some 20 million people around the world. It's a Muslim majority country in the center of Europe. This is the place where, most of the kind of big problems of Europe started many of them started in the Balkan countries. So we had it with the heads of the parliaments of different countries in the region of Montenegro, Kosovo, North Macedonia, all these countries. And here we see a few months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, the Prime Minister of Albania came to visit for a state visit in Israel. And what is the thing that he wanted to have a gala dinner about? It was about anti-Semitism. And he came here, and in June we are planning now a follow-up of this meeting on a more practical level, because last time we had legislations, now we wanted to have it on the government level. So that's what's going to happen now. It's not like it's going to resolve all the issues, but we put it strong on the table. We put a spot on this, and we have to follow up. When I say we, it's both the Jewish communities around the world and the state of Israel. And the state of Israel has a very important role to play here, and which is not and it's not playing it enough.
Right. Okay. So let's on a more optimistic note. Where are you optimistic outside of, let's say, Israel, even in general? What are you optimistic about the future of world Jewry, and how are we helping like speed up the positive stuff? Right. We're talking about how a lot of our conversation was about combating anti-Semitism. We talked about how are we going to address things of that sort. We also addressed some positive things about bringing different people together, which is important. Where are you most optimistic for the future of the Jewish people? And how do you play a part?
Yeah. No, first I'm optimistic when I see my grandchildren, and I have 7, and I see how they think, what they think about themselves. The very fact that they're growing up not as a minority, but as proud citizens of their own country. I can tell you a million of problems that they are facing in the educational system here in Israel, and how the parents are worried about this, from the kindergarten to the universities. But the very fact that they're here, it really gives me a lot of optimism. The very fact that we are sitting here, you're from the United States, I'm from Ukraine. You don't see her, but Gal is sitting in another corner, and she's from Argentina, and 3 of us are Israelis now. So this gives me a lot of optimism, and I think that this trend will continue. What gives me an optimism is, we are here. I'm in the Midtown. This is a kind of Midtown of. It's called, the building is called Midtown, but it's actually the Midtown of a new kind of. So my office at the World Jewish Congress used to be on the Madison Avenue and the 51st, kind of the center of Manhattan. So I can tell you, Manhattan is now here. The buildings are around.
Here, by the way, you're in Tel Aviv, in case people don't know. You're talking
Tel Aviv, yeah. So the buildings that are surrounding my building now, the next building here that they're building now is going to be 92 stores building. It's already, part of it is already rented out. Google just rented out for $1.2 billion for 10 years, building next to us at Toha. So it's booming. This country is really, the economy here is booming, the population is booming. The fact that, once again, regardless of the political views, but the fact that 10,000 people showed up yesterday opposing some decision of the government on the legal system here shows that 10,000 people care in 48 hours to be on the streets. Try to have something like this in Manhattan or in Paris. It's not so easy anymore. So I think that we have a very vibrant society here in Israel. And I think the economy here is booming, and it gives me a lot of optimism.
Awesome. Great. People can learn more about your work, what you're doing, Center for Jewish Impact, or anything. How can they follow you and learn more, and how can they get involved?
Now, first of all, they are more than welcome to be involved in everything that we are doing at the Center for Jewish Impact, Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, Alumotor, Sasaset on ORT, and we'll send you later all the contact details.
Awesome. Great. And we'll put them down in the description. Thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure to have you, Robert Singer. Thanks for being a guest on Israel Unfiltered.
Thank you, Yoel.